So firstly, many thanks for your well wishes for Meg. I'm pleased to say that she is much better and she'll be back to 100% in a few more days. In fact, if you follow me on Instagram, then you might have seen a quite unique and personal message on there. But anyway, today I want to continue the Photographer's Story series, and I'm delighted to have Ben Horne as a guest this week, a name that you might be familiar with, as you might have seen his channel on YouTube. Now, I've not met Ben in person, but I've been following his work ever since I started on YouTube. I think I was out shooting with Thomas Heaton one day and he introduced me to Ben's work. And the thing that I love and admire about Ben's channel is his integrity, consistency and devotion to his practice as a large format film photographer. And I also have a lot of admiration and envy for the weight of gear that he can carry in order to craft his images, but also to continually improve the production quality of his videos. Perhaps one day I'll get to go to Zion and shoot with Ben. That'll be really cool, and get to photograph some of those beautiful cottonwood trees and maybe even say hello to some of the trees that Ben's going to talk about in his story.
Well, first and foremost, I want to thank you, Simon, for putting this project together. I think there's something very important about storytelling, and especially in these times right now, I think it's something that's definitely very beneficial. So I have two photos I'd like to share today and tell the story behind those photos. They're both taken in Utah, I know, big surprise. And the thing that they have in common is they're very imperfect subjects, but in many ways I think that really helps in terms of the storytelling. This first photo right here, this was taken on my spring backpacking trip to southern Utah. And it was a canyon I had never visited before. So I saw it on satellite maps and I saw that there was some desert varnish. I saw that there were some trees down the canyon, and to me that was a pretty good formula for finding some good subjects. But I hiked into this canyon and it was mostly sunny skies, a little bit of clouds up there. And actually I hiked through this little archway right here, kind of heading further up the canyon here. I didn't even really notice the scene here. And as I made my way up to a narrower section of the canyon, some darker clouds started building overhead, so I decided to get out of there because you don't want to be in these narrow sections of canyon if there's any storms that are threatening. And so it was when I was hiking back through the canyon that I noticed that wonderful scene with the tree. And it really stood out to me so much. And I think part of it has to do with the mentality I have on the first day or so of a trip. There's something I always call the first day funk. It happens every single trip. And I think it's partially a result of, being in a different environment now. You get really comfortable at home, you have your routine, everything's all set. But when you go on these trips, especially when it is a backpacking trip where I'm off in the middle of nowhere, there's a certain point when I sort of question, what am I doing here? Is this really something I'm really cut out for? And I realize how much work is ahead of me, but it's something I truly do enjoy doing. But that first day or two, that can be a little bit difficult. And so when I saw this subject right here, I really identified with it. Just the fact that you have this tree that is broken in half. Yeah, you have this branch right here, which just has this will to survive and to keep going on, and has so much sort of optimism for what's going on. So it really reflected my own thoughts when I was on this day, on the first day of the trip. But there's another meaning behind the title for this photo as well. So again, I call this one Unbroken. And this was the first trip I went on after my winter trip to Death Valley, where my primary 8x10 camera was kind of destroyed by wind. So if I'm shooting a photo in the morning, kind of a blue hour photo, I can't see through the viewfinder enough to set up the composition or focus or anything like that. So what I've learned to do is set the camera up overnight, weight it down with some rocks, come back to the morning, and it's there waiting for me. But that particular night, there was some pretty crazy strong gusts of wind that went through and just bashed my camera into the ground, shattered the ground glass, broke some wooden components on the camera. And so that was a little bit of an eye-opener there. I had a backup camera where I can keep going on the rest of the trip, but the following day, some rodents chewed through the wires in my engine and disabled my forerunner, so it's kind of an insult to injury. So when I went backpacking into this canyon, my camera was repaired by a very good friend of mine named Mike Fink. and he rebuilt the camera. He had to do some expert woodworking to rebuild the camera. So the camera was unbroken. This tree is unbroken. And also I had a bit of a sort of a unbroken spirit within me to battle past that first day funk and then just kind of, you know, fall into the rhythm of going on the trip, especially when I'm kind of off in a wilderness area where I'm just off there all by myself. But that's one of the photos I really do enjoy to this day. And also it's just a reminder to me to turn around and look where you've been, because you can, it's, you know, an entirely different perspective and you'll see things differently that way. So the second photo I want to share, this was photographed in Zion National Park. This is also a cottonwood tree, so same tree as the first photo there. And I just love shooting cottonwood trees. They have so much character to them. And this was taken pretty late in the trip. This was in 2013. And truth be told, I was not feeling great when I shot this photo. It was late in the trip. I was pretty worn out physically, but more than that, I had this really nasty cold that I came down with. I think it was from being on the shuttle system in Zion. And so I was pretty miserable. I was kind of in a bit of a fog. And also I had some sort of sciatic nerve thing going on too. So the thought of putting on a heavy backpack, then hiking into some of these areas was just completely unappealing. So I decided just to go off into the main canyon, and I had my camera with me, and I was just kind of waddling along the trail, I guess you would say. And I found this scene, and it was something that I had spotted the day before. I figured I'd just go there, take a photo of that scene. But I really identified with the scene where you have this fallen tree here. And what I loved was this branch right here, which is cradling those grasses right there. And then you have this cluster of trees back here, just kind of like standing right over this fallen tree. Another clustered trees back over there. And to me, it felt very poetic, especially in the very painterly reflected light in Zion National Park. But this was back in 2013, and I titled this photo "Life Everlasting" because this tree is, you know, giving its nutrients back to the soil. It's kind of new life is springing up from it, and it's very, very poetic in that sense. But when I posted that picture on my blog way back in 2013, there was a longtime viewer of the videos and commenter, a very talented photographer by the name of David Patterson. And I remember he left a comment on that, and I loved having, you know, conversations with him and swapping messages back and forth. But that was actually the last picture he ever commented on, because not long after that, he wasn't feeling great. Actually, he ended up having lung cancer, and he died in kind of the spring of 2014. So I always refer to that tree as David's tree, because I always think of David whenever I see that tree there. So whenever I visit Zion, I like to revisit that tree and check up on it and see how it's doing. But there's definitely something very, very special about storytelling when it comes to photography. And I think one of the keys to that is looking for the subjects that have some degree of imperfection, whether it's a big broken branch or just a scene that may not be beautiful in traditional sense, but it definitely lends itself to a story. But thanks again for putting this together, Simon, and I look forward to seeing the other stories that come along the way.
Thank you very much, Ben, for sharing your beautiful images and the stories behind them. You know, looking at Ben's first photograph, Unbroken, I just love the simplicity of it, and yet with all those opposing angles from the branch structures, the rocky slope and the lines in that candy-like backdrop, it just makes it visually striking and more dynamic. And the colour contrast is fantastic. But I just adore that soft reflected light that Ben uses in Zion. You know, being a woodland photographer, I love soft light because it just does wonders for those beautiful textures, the delicate details, and that painterly quality of trees. But when Ben was talking about his second photograph, that really struck a chord with me, and his state of mind when he took it. You know, being a little bit miserable, in pain, and just feeling a little bit beaten. And I think that's evident in his choice of subject. You know, it's not beautiful in the traditional sense, but it's personal and poetic, and demonstrates Ben's translation of his emotion into the imagery. And I just think it's great that he's identified that connection between his friend and that tree, and that every time he goes back to Zion, he revisits that tree and I'm sure thinks back to conversations that they've shared. Perhaps the key thing to ponder here, and is part of the reason why I started this series, is that the stories give you a glimpse into how the photographer thinks, what makes them tick, and how their connection with nature helps to shape their vision. Some people just want to look at and enjoy a photograph and don't care about the story, or perhaps they want to imagine their own story. But if you're looking to learn, then I think that listening to a photographer talk passionately about their own work can be insightful and can help to give a sense of their outlook on nature and how they connect their emotion to the making of images. As Ben said, there's something very special about storytelling in photography, but I also think it's valuable when trying to nourish your own imagination. Please keep sharing your images and stories with the hashtag #TheTreesStillGrow, or feel free to email me. Many thanks to everyone that's been in touch already to share your thoughts. I'll be back very soon with some more guest photographers and of course to share some of your stories. But thank you very much for watching this episode, and as always, I hope to see you for the next one.